You are listening to I Survived the Wild Outdoors podcast, where real outdoors men and women share their heroic tales of survival. I'm your host, Brad Mathewson, and this is their story. Hello, everyone. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Marshall, bushcraft and survival expert, and former host of Marshall's Bushcraft on Canada's Wild TV, and author of a new book, Fire, Water, Shelter. But long before any of that, Ryan was just a guy in his early 20s who said yes to a winter mountain trip he wasn't fully prepared for. With about $100 worth of Walmart gear and limited experience, he and a few friends set out to climb a mountain, only to find themselves unprepared and overmatched. The deep snow quickly zapped their energy and slowed their ascent when a full-on blizzard caught them above tree line. Wet, exhausted, and without a way to get warm, things escalated quickly. They made it through the night, but that experience forced Ryan to confront a hard truth. He wasn't ready. What followed was years of obsessive learning, practicing, and refining the skills that would eventually take him from that moment to teaching others and hosting his own television show, and now writing a book focused on fundamentals of survival. Can you tell us what happened that day, Ryan?
Yeah, man, for sure. So I think I was 23 or 24, something like that. I can't remember. I kind of all just blends in at this point. But yeah, so pretty much what was happening was I got a text from my cousin, and he said he offered me to go on a winter mountain excursion. So we were going to try and climb two mountains, I do believe it was, and yeah, just going for a big snowshoe up the mountains. And I was like, yeah, 100%. Sounds like a pretty good time. Now, granted, this is before I did a lot of video stuff. This is before actually I was that into bushcraft. I was always an outdoorsman, but I'm not gonna lie, like as a younger guy, I was really, really into the outdoors, and then I found that girls existed. So the bushcraft maybe was on hiatus for a couple of years there. But not to digress too far, just kind of an average outdoorsman, not really too particularly skilled, decided, hey, we're going to go. So it's my cousin and this other guy I had never met before. Now, I didn't even have any outdoors gear at the time, like none. My cousin had some stuff, but I went to Walmart, spent like $100 and was like, yeah, that's probably good enough. I've seen Survivor, man, like 5 times. So I got a good handle of dealing with emergencies, which, you know, that's just ego, and all men have ego, unfortunately. And I was about to eat some serious humble pie. So we get out to this mountain. It's over by Cabin in Alberta, where you're going to hike up an area called Leland Pass. And when we get there, there is like 7 feet of snow. I think, anyways. I couldn't even tell you because we never actually reached the bottom. And even with I didn't even know how to size snowshoes completely correctly because I've never been in that deep of snow before. So I had on these like 18-inch snowshoes, which anybody now that's listening to this should know that the higher your body weight with a backpack on, the longer your snowshoes need to be to break up to the weight and actually not sink down. So essentially, the entire way, I'm just shoveling with my feet because I'm sinking down a ton, and then I'm also pulling up like 8 pounds of snow every time I'm taking a step. If you can imagine, that makes you pretty exhausted. And man, snowshoeing is one of those things where, you know, in the time that you could normally walk 400 meters, you only go about 100 meters. Like it's a slow and arduous process, and you're constantly busting through and having to dig yourself out. It's kind of awful, actually. I'm surprised that, that's not used to torture people in war times, because good God, is it awful. So we're snowshoeing up, and the one thing that we had done correct on that trip, or at least we thought we did, was we had checked the weather forecast, and we were supposed to be clear. We weren't supposed to get any snow, but obviously the mountains are pretty unpredictable, and we get hit with a blizzard. Like one of those blizzards where you cannot see a guy who's 6 feet in front of you for a section of it. Like we're just getting snowed on like crazy. And we had started the trip pretty late. So, we were running out of daylight pretty quick. And like I was telling you, we had shot, like we were, 8 pounds of snow on every step you're taking and sinking through. So we broke the cardinal rule in the mountains, and the whole way up trying to get to camp, we were sweating like crazy. So I'm soaking wet in the outdoors, like in the mountains. The guy that was also with my cousin was soaking wet in the outdoors. And I think my cousin actually had some decent gear, so he wasn't as bad. So it starts to get really apparent that we're starting to shiver, and like shiver, like we're getting cold. My pants were so wet and frozen that every time I was taking a step, my pants were actually kind of like cracking, like not breaking, but like the ice on the outside, the outer layer was actually cracking and then falling off my pants. And at this point, we've made it above the tree line. So we're super high up there, and we can't have a fire. There's no way to make a fire. We can't see the trees even. And we're just getting pelted with snow. And it's cold. It's probably minus 20 degrees Celsius. So I think that's like -5 Fahrenheit, -10 Fahrenheit or something like that. And we're just getting destroyed out there. And I had $100 worth of stuff from Walmart. I didn't have, forgot to mention this part. I was going to show these guys how great of a survivalist I was, even though I had no business even attempting this. I had a sleeping bag that was rated for +10, no sleeping pad, no real extra clothes. Like I had like an extra sweater. It was all cotton. It was all just no gear at all that was appropriate for that situation. And when we finally realized we needed to make a fire, we're 4 or 6 hours from the trailhead. So we're just like, there's no going back down. Like we're exhausted. We just been, we just lost, 3 liters of sweat getting up this mountain. We're absolutely destroyed, and we can't have a fire. And we know if we stop, that's it. That's hypothermia. Like we're getting to the point where we're actually not even feeling cold anymore. We're feeling hot. So we're stripping layers. We're doing all that stuff, which is, it's getting to be like level 2, level 3 hypothermia. And it's funny, it's the whole way up, you get a group of guys together, they're laughing and joking and making fun of each other. And when we would stop for a quick break, we noticed that we were all shaking, and the situation that it's almost pitch black out, and there's no wood, and we're freezing. But we all kind of realized that, hey, this isn't good. So there's a small break in the storm, and we look down, and we could see probably 400 to 600 yards away that there's like an outcropping of trees next to a cliff. And like, all right, well, we have to maneuver there, because if we can find dry wood, we can at least dry out before trying to go to sleep. So we start making our way down, and it probably takes us, just to go 600 meters, probably takes us almost an hour, maybe 45 minutes. And we get there, and like most of the trees are completely green. And our axe that we had got along the way had actually chipped. Earlier in the day, we had stopped to make a quick fire to dry out. The other guy who was with us, I'm not going to say his name because I don't know, he's not really a public figure, but he had actually been wearing ankle socks on this and ankle boots, and his feet had gotten so cold that earlier on we had to stop and like dry his feet out and give him a new pair of socks. But Anyway, so that axe had actually chipped when we had grabbed that wood. So we're breaking branches, and I actually had, for some stupid reason, I had brought a parang, which is like an Indonesian machete, which is about as useful as a toothbrush when you're talking about taking down trees in the mountains. It's really not good. And it didn't really matter because like all the trees that were there were pretty green. Like there were a couple skinny pieces of firewood that we could get going, but that was it. But to get them started, to take those down and to actually like get the fire going, we needed actual kindling because we didn't have a way to split it. You're not going to do it with a parang. And then we all get real quiet, because we realize, okay, well, we made it to the trees. We're all exhausted, and we're probably not going to get a fire going here. And I was like, just kind of taking a moment by myself, looking over this cliff, thinking, yeah, I'm probably, this is it. I'm probably fucked. And I looked down the cliff, and out growing out of the cliff, there was like a bunch of these scraggly old dead trees that had like tried to grow and then died over the years. The like problem was is that they were probably 4 to 5 feet down to the edge of the cliff. And like, I didn't really know too many knots back then. I didn't really know anything. Clearly I didn't know anything because I found myself in this situation. So we decided we were going to take our backpacks and tie them to the tree that was closest to the cliff, and then tie the backpacks together the best we can, and then tie that around my one hand, and then lean down over the cliff and start hacking at these like dead branches and stuff to bring them up so we could at least, get a fire started out there. And, it's cutting the circulation off of my hand, and I'm pinning the log or like the branches up against the cliff with one foot, swinging the parang with my other hand, and then like transferring the parang to another hand that's like being tied up so I can reach down and grab the branches that I have pinned against the cliff with my foot while still dangling like, probably between 40 and 60 feet in the air. And like pulling these up to either that or freeze to death. And, it's getting pretty dire at this point. And we finally, all this, by the way, takes place over 2 hours, like searching for wood, going down there, like, and we're already exhausted when we get there. We finally get these branches up, and we struggle getting this fire lit for probably half an hour. And we finally we get this fire lit, and I strip down. I have just my base layers on. And again, like I'm not even cold at this point, even though like when I took my pants off, they stood up by themselves. Like they weren't even technical pants. They were just a pair of Carhartts, which I don't even know what I was thinking. And we start kind of stringing stuff up to dry. And I was so hungry. And I didn't even know what to bring for food. So I had packed a couple cans of chunky soup. And I was trying to cook them on the fire. And I realized that I didn't even bring a can opener. So I'm like, my hands are shaking so bad. And I'm trying to do it with a knife. And I don't even know, like, I can't put the can into the snow to like stab it, because every time I try to do it, it would sink into the snow. And literally, like, it took me 40 minutes to get this can open. And I put it on the fire for like, I don't know, a minute. And that was to this day one of the best meals I had when I finally was eating. It was like still like it was lukewarm at best. It's like someone ran it, underneath a tap for a minute and ate it. It was pretty bad. And then, it's funny that the other guy that was there, he's just one of those guys that's like always wants to be a tough guy. Like we all run into those guys, He's like he's never scared or weak or anything. And he looked at us both, me and my cousin, and he's like, if you guys weren't here, I'm pretty sure that I would be crying right now. And he, his eyes kind of welled up a little bit, and we were all kind of feeling like that because that was a pretty close call. And so then we finally, we got somewhat dried out. And that guy, I had just met him that day, and he had brought a tent. And remember, I didn't bring any of that stuff. I was just going to Survivor Man because I seen it on TV once. And I ended up that night, me and that guy who we had just met that day were cuddling for warmth on top of a mountain, like turns being Big Spoon up there because it was freaking awful. And we made it through that night. And our original plan is that we were going to carry on, to multiple mountains. I didn't even make it up one full mountain, really. And we turned around and we hightailed it out of there. And I'll tell you this, when I was coming down that mountain, I was a lot more humble than I was going up that mountain. And that was kind of actually the start of me getting back. And I'm like, okay, well, that can never happen again. That can never, ever happen again. That was seriously close to freezing to death on top of the mountain. I need to learn everything that I can about survival stuff. So when I got back, like even on the car ride back, I was watching videos on my phone and I was like trying to order books, and that was the start of the next 10 years, which it wouldn't be for another probably 8 years after that instance that I started doing video stuff, because after that it was like someone lit a fire inside me. Like all I would consume would be outdoors books, outdoors content, talk to people, whoever would talk to me about like stuff that they knew in the outdoors, listening to outdoors related podcasts, watching, survival shows, then going out every single weekend and every single other week and practicing myself, researching gear, researching firelays, researching water purification, you name it, I was researching it. And then when I was done researching for the week and I had my weekends off, I would be out there practicing. And even if at the time I didn't even have a vehicle, I was kind of young and poor, and I would go down to the river valley in Edmonton and I would practice bow drill, and I would practice using a ferro rod, and I would practice purifying water, and I would practice setting up different fire lays to see while at the same time, whenever the cops would come, I'd have to run and get out of there. I don't know what the statute of limitations of me saying that is, but that's kind of like how it all started. And then, after that, I got my next job, which was 7 days on and 7 days off. And I started doing every 7 days I had off, I would go to the bush and just keep practicing and keep learning and just wanting to be better so that could never, ever, ever happen again. And eventually, I started thinking about making videos, and that took a year or two because to work up the courage to actually post some of the stuff that I've learned. And yeah, that's how Marshall Bushcraft was born. That's kind of the start of this whole thing, which turned into, me teaching at universities and me having a fairly respectable, I think I got 100 and something thousand followers on social media, if you add up the apps there. And, just trying to pass on the stuff that I had learned through, spending multiple years of spending half the year in the bush doing survival trips, every year, or even before then, all the practicing and all the learning and that's just kind of like how that all started. And eventually, it started growing, and now, I can say I'm actually a published author. I wrote a book called Fire, Water, Shelter, which is talking, one, about this story and all the stuff that I think that people who are getting into the outdoors or who are even intermediate in the outdoors should know, so they never find themselves in a situation like that I had found myself in. And yeah, that is the backstory, the character lore of Marshall Bushcraft.
So what do you feel is missing in the way of survival, the way it's typically taught or talked about nowadays?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that people don't realize is that everything is situational. Like, for example, if I was to ask you, what's better, an axe or a saw? Well, it depends on what you're doing. If I was to say, like, what skills should you focus on first? should it be friction fire or plant identification? It's like, well, what type of trips are you doing? You know, like everything's situationally dependent. So like the way that I look at survival and the outdoors, I think that the knowledge you have is a toolbox. And even things that you're never going to use, you should, well, not never, but even things you don't think you're ever going to use, you should learn how to do them just in case, you know? Like, you need to have a lot of knowledge, and you need to be able to kind of deploy that knowledge when needed. Morris Cohansky, one of the most prolific bushcrafters of all time, guy taught Arctic survival, or northern boreal survival to not only the Canadian armed forces, but also the American special forces. And, you know, he was the gold standard for years. He was quoted famously for saying, knowledge weighs nothing, and you can carry it with you wherever you go. But as far as like what's being taught, I think that people focus a lot on the flashy things because they're more exciting. Like, for example, learning how to start a fire with a bow drill. Yes. Can I do that? Absolutely. But trying to think of a situation where you would ever in real life need to use that, so many things have to fail before you get to that point. Like, you would have to be separated from your main backpack. You would have had to improperly packed. You would have had to, you know, get stranded somewhere, and then by happenstance have some bank line or paracord and a knife. And also, the thing is too, is like, even with a bow drill, your wood selection is like identifying wood. I would rather learn that than learning the bow drill right away. Because even like most woods, you know, in the wintertime, for example, there's a lot of conifers that aren't as resinous, but they will lose their needles, you know? And
yep.
But they're still alive. And if you try and do a bow drill with that, you know, just because it looks like it's a dead tree, it will never, ever, ever work. You know, understanding straight grains and softwood is, you know, it's very important. But people want to focus on things like the bow drill. People want to focus on like solar fires, you know, starting a fire with a magnifying glass. When are you going to be in a situation where you are completely lost, but you're out there with a magnifying glass?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, when is that going to happen?
No,
it's not going to happen.
You see that in America,
I mean,
America, the old MacGyver show. I don't know if you have it in MacGyver up in Canada. Sure. Did you? In the early 90s?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he would always come up with stuff like that. And I remember as a kid, you have a magnifying glass trying to start fires. But yeah, like I said, yeah, who's going to carry a magnifying glass? Nobody.
No, and it's like, even when you look at like the guys that they do that thing with like steel wool.
Yep.
And they're like, if you take a 9-volt battery, you can start a fire. Well, I do think the steel wool is worth carrying because it's a very lightweight way to wash your pans in the outdoors, which is very important to do. So you're not, you know, putting, you know, food scraps into your backpack. And steel wool can light a fire any which way you want. You can put a lighter on it, a ferro rod on it. I'm pretty sure you can use solar magnification actually on steel wool. It's kind of a jack of all trades, actually. It's actually a pretty good fire starter. But one thing I'm not going to do is carry a 9-volt battery randomly out in the bush, just in case I'm ever in a situation where I need to start a fire. Like, okay, carry an extra lighter. Get really good with a ferro rod. Carry some storm-proof matches. You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of things that are very flashy in the outdoors that they're not worth learning. They're really not.
Okay.
Like, I guess they're worth learning, but like the chances of you using them are very, very, very small. And there are things you should focus on first.
So you try to teach basically like practical things, not all these other flashy extras you see where learn to start a fire 20 different ways. And I mean, I suppose that some of that is good, right? I mean, having some of that in your back pocket, just in case type scenarios, in case, you know, these 10 different ways fail, and you always have that That extra little thing sitting there?
Well, there's like a really flashy. Have you ever heard of the Morris Kohansky Super Shelter?
No.
So the Morris Kohansky Super Shelter is very, very flashy, but it's also very effective. I did a survival challenge on my YouTube where I show it. But it's essentially you take one of those space blankets, an emergency space blanket,
Okay.
and a painter's drop cloth, and you turn it into like a tent, and you have a fire out in front. And what happens is the heat from the fire can come into that tent,
Okay.
but it doesn't escape very fast. So even in like minus, I had I think it was like minus 25 or minus 30, and I was sleeping there, and I showed the thermometer, and it was like, plus 20 degrees Celsius. It heated up over 50 degrees in there.
Wow.
And if you learn that, which is very, very flashy, it doesn't look like it would work. So it's like literally like, I'm going to use this garbage to make a shelter, but it's great and it works amazingly. And you can set that up in your backyard and practice at home. That and some paracord, you're kind of good to go. That is a flashy skill, but it's like people who don't know or don't have like, a great deal of experience are going to be they're the most at risk for two reasons. One, like I started that story off by saying, I thought I knew, and my ego got in the way of me actually achieving something there. Like, I thought that I was good to go, because it's a problem that men have, man. Like, we have this thing where we're like, yeah, I'm just going to go out there and figure it out. It can't be that hard. I have a general understanding. And that couldn't have been further for the truth for myself. And I've taken people out on survival trips before that thought that way. And then you end up babysitting them. And they're like, wow, I can't believe that was that hard,
Yep.
So that's the first part where they're at risk. And two, because they don't really know what is flashy and what isn't flashy, that's where they get, when you guys start like talking about like how they're going to make char cloth out there just in case. It's like, so you're packed an extra shirt that you're going to rip up, and then you're going to,
yeah, that's not what it's supposed to be about. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, char cloth, it has some uses. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's one of those things that you should know how to make it, because just in case, but like, it shouldn't be, char cloth takes about 5 minutes to learn how to make, and it shouldn't be one of those things that like you spend a whole lot of time focusing on it. I would be hard pressed to ever be like, well, I got to make some char cloth because I'm going on a trip this week. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What are we talking about here? Well, like a lot of it that people share nowadays is absolutely something that works. Don't get me wrong. Like, most of the guys that are making these big videos, they're actually not lying to you that something works. But most of the time they go out there with the idea of showing that skill set, and so they pack accordingly for that. Most survival should be thought about before you actually go to the outdoors. Like, for example, I don't believe in carrying a survival kit going to the bush.
Okay.
Because what you should have is everything you ever need to sustain yourself in your backpack. Like, if you think about it, you know that you're going on a 3-day hike, right?
Yep.
Well, you should have paracord. You should have a shelter, like a tent and a sleeping bag. You should have extra food. You should have a way of purifying water. You should have like a way to charge up your devices. You should have a communication device with you. And when you look at those things and you have all that, what is there to put in a survival kit that's not already in your backpack? Some fire starters? You should have those. You know what I mean? Some fishing hooks? Yeah, I mean, like, I'll be honest, man. Like, knowledge goes a long way in that situation, because, like, fishing hooks would be one thing that I did, it's probably something you might want to carry if you're really going back there. But, I mean, the Native Americans never had fishing hooks, and they would use things like fishing weirs, which is like a really cool fish trap you can make just by making the letter M in the bush with a bunch of sticks. And I mean, there isn't a whole lot of reason, not to get too sidetracked here, but there isn't a whole lot of reason to carry an actual survival kit. Like, where you would put a survival kit would be like in your car or in your daily backpack, so that when you're actually out and about, and survival happens because no one's actually ready for it. But if you greatly increase your odds, if you have one kind of just part of your EDC, your everyday carry, you can greatly, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. I did a video on my YouTube where I broke down like what I actually carry, and I show like my backpack and it looks completely empty. And there's an entire setup in there that would get me through like a night in minus 40. There's some extra food. There's all the stuff I need to make the Morse Kohansky super shelter. There's a knife. There's a multi-tool. There's some fire starters. There's a way too light fires, a lighter and a ferro rod. There's a light, like those are all pragmatic things to carry on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, that's just experience. Like people don't understand, like, you guys spend more time planning than anything, really. Like, this is the terrain, this is the climate, this is what could happen. If I get caught in a rainstorm, am I prepared? If I can't find a way to make fire, can I purify water? If it's the temperature says it's going to be this, but if it drops lower than that, am I prepared? If I get lost, am I prepared? Like, that's what I think survival should mostly be. It shouldn't be all these like flashy, gimmicky, learn them. Like, obviously learn the flashy and gimmicky stuff, because you know what? It's flashy and gimmicky and get the eyes, because most of it does actually work. But you don't need to you don't need to make a compass with 2 sticks if you just know how to, read a compass. You know what I mean? Like, doing like the shadow dial compass, yeah, that does work. It will give you a northwest, east-south bearing. It will. But if you kind of have an idea of where you are and you have a way to navigate, you probably don't need to worry about knowing how to make a compass with 2 sticks and 2 rocks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you going through that life or death situation, basically. So I guess what would your advice be if someone else is in a life and death situation? I mean, how does one manage that?
Like, mentally?
Yeah,
I was
mentally.
really lucky because I wasn't alone. I was really lucky because I wasn't alone.
Okay.
If I was alone, I would have died out there, 100%.
But I mean, even in a group, I mean, how do you manage it? I mean, like, how do you get through that? Or is it collectively you're just talking it out through the process? Or, I mean,
yeah, like you can divide up tasks. It makes like everybody does 1/3 of the work. My situation, we had 3 guys, and like while I was dangling, one guy was grabbing, like, kind of safety watching me and grabbing the wood from me. The other guy was bringing it to where we decided we're going to have our fire and trudging along. Like, while one guy was setting up tents, the other guy was diligently watching the fire to make sure it didn't go out. And you're kind of all just working together. I don't know if there's like an answer of like how you get through it. I think that if I was one of those guys that wanted to give you a bunch of gimmicky stuff, I would say something along the lines of, you just got to persevere and you got to dig deep and all these things. But the truth of the matter is like, in these real life situations, there isn't anything else you can do than left foot, right foot,
Okay.
To stay still in those situations is to die. So you need to take your left foot and put it forward, and take your right foot and put that forward. And you need to just keep breaking down your problems into bite-sized pieces. Like, okay, if you look at that full situation and you say, wow, we're so far from cell service, we can't get a fire going. There's no way I get a fire going. We're having hypothermia right now. I don't have a shelter. I don't have a sleeping bag that's warm enough. I'm soaking wet. And you look at all those problems, and if you try and look at those all at once, it's chaos, and you'll never be able to solve them. But it's one problem at a time. Okay, well, the first thing we need to do is figure out fire. So let's break that down, work as a team to get there. Okay, now I need to address these wet clothes. So let's figure out a way to like hang up some clothes, strip down, get close to this fire, and dry off. Then it's food. Then it's shelter. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's about breaking things down into what is our number one priority in this moment, and just working on that until you start ticking that box off. And once that's ticked off, what's our next priority? Next priority, next priority.
So what kind of reader do you think will be most impacted by this book?
I think that, this book was meant for people who are beginning or into intermediate level outdoorsmen, or also kids and stuff. Like it's meant to be like, okay, well, I've been on some hikes, I've been on some big hunting trips, but I wouldn't classify myself as a really good bushcrafter or like an expert in this or an expert in that. This would be a good book for somebody who goes on a lot of trips and wants to have practical knowledge as to how to get through situations. And as to like, what this book is going to do is it's going to put, a couple hundred more tools in your toolbox. And, maybe if you're an intermediate, it'll only put 50 more tools in your toolbox. But it is designed as kind of a way to just show people a lot of stuff that they didn't know. Like, for example, I was just telling you, we talked before this, you're a very experienced outdoorsman. You had no idea about the Morris Kohansky Super Shelter.
Nope.
And that's fine. Most people don't have a clue that you can actually have a shelter that you could build out of pretty much some garbage in your backpack. And it weighs, I think that whole setup weighs, I don't know, like 3 ounces.
Yeah, it's already in my backpack. Already got the space blanket, already got a garbage bag. It's already in there.
As long as that garbage bag is clear, you're good to go. It has to be clear.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it has to be a clear one.
Okay.
But you can get clear garbage bags.
Yep.
You can watch a video on it after and you'll see. But a painter's drop cloth works the best. But anyways, like, you have that stuff and you're set. But like, you didn't know that. And that's not an attack at you. I'm just saying most people, even guys who are super avid outdoorsmen, don't realize some of the things that are in that book. And, it can go a long ways to help people out.
So, in closing here, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think we got her, man. That was my story about how I almost died in the bush, and kind of my story is how I ended up deciding to make videos, and I got super obsessed with the outdoors.
Thank you, Ryan.
I guess I will say, if you want to check out more content, you can look me up, Marshall Bushcraft, at Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, you name it. I'm not as active on TikTok, but I do post some stuff there. I think that's just a little bit before my generation. Oh, and Fire, Water, Shelter is the name of my book. If you guys are interested in just real life practical knowledge, that I absolutely implore you to fact check me on, because that's something you should do for every book you read. Fire, Water, Shelter, it's available anywhere you get books by Marshall Bushcraft. We go through everything from like narcotic plants to different ways of lighting fires and purifying water and navigating. And we do actually put even some of the flashier stuff in there. It's in its own section though, where I call it campcraft, just like projects that you can play around with if you want to learn some of that stuff. Because like I said, all tools should be put in our toolbox, but the meat and potatoes of the book, the reason why it's called Fire, Water, Shelter, is most survival situations are 72 hours. And in that, you need fire, you need water, and you need shelter. Food is an afterthought. You can go a long time without food. But we still talk about trapping and all that stuff in there as well.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Ryan. A big thank you to Ryan Marshall for coming on and sharing his story. Honestly, it's one of those conversations that really makes you think about preparation, awareness, and how quickly things can change when you're pushed outside your comfort zone. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out Ryan's new book, Fire, Water, Shelter. I'll have a link to his book on Amazon, along with all his social media accounts in the podcast description and across my social media channels. And remember to follow me at I Survive the Wild Outdoors. And as always, stay safe out there, and enjoy all that Mother Nature has to offer. If you like what you heard today, click the subscribe button to hear more upcoming stories. If you or someone you know have a survival story you'd like to share, contact me at isurvivethewildoutdoors@gmail.com.